Welcome to this episode of Mercy Can't Stop Her. I'm your host, Judith Hambia Obatusa, JKO. This Easter weekend, I did my advance voting in Canada's federal election. Tuesday will be the election day proper. But I like advance voting because there are less people and you just go, it's less stress. And we had 4 days for people to be able to do their advance voting. And I was just thinking about how so many people are so sure that a particular candidate is evil without any real proof except what they read in the papers. Narratives that have been framed to influence their thought pattern. Making judgments about people we don't know based on nothing but a headline or a passing comment. I remember somebody told me about someone and said, this person was this and that. I said, do you know them personally? Do you have proof of what you just said? And the person did not have proof. In fact, these days, when you ask questions like that, you're immediately cut off as well. You become an enemy. But do you know that we do this every day? We think that it's just about politics. No, we do this to strangers, we do it to friends, even to people that we love sometimes. We assume we know why someone acts the way that they do. And some of those times, in fact, many of those times, we will turn out to be wrong if only we bother to check. How do I know this? Have you ever felt that there are people who judge other people harshly? So they are doing the same thing, or their children are doing the same thing, but when it's someone else's child or someone else, they just say that person is bad. For example, somebody shows up late to a meeting because they ran into traffic. And the assumption that is immediately made is that that person is sloppy, disorganized, and all other kinds of words that may be used to describe that person. But if they came late to be because there was a truck that had an accident and all that, and we are expected to understand. Do you know that this phenomenon is called fundamental attribution error by behavioral scientists? You know, I discovered the name fundamental attribution error when I went searching. What is that thing that makes people judge other people harshly? And I discovered there was a phenomenon. It is a phenomenon where person's behavior is attributed to their personality, internal factors. In fact, another name for it is correspondence bias. So a person's behavior corresponds to their personality. Many people actually operate under this. And their assumption is that the person's behavior reflects their personality, not their situation. He didn't call me back. He didn't call me back because she's inconsiderate. Maybe she's in the hospital, but you don't know. He was short with me because he's rude. Maybe he just got bad news, but you don't know. And this particular behavior, this particular thinking pattern also means that sometimes when you're explaining your situation to people, they're not hearing you. They're blaming you. They're judging you. So you give explanations thinking that, oh, it will make them understand where you're coming from better. And instead of them understanding where you're coming from, they dismiss it and they go ahead and add to if you're dealing with trauma, add to it, create more problems for you because they've judged you. Just like somebody going through the child welfare system. The same thing that happened to a Black woman could happen to a white person. What's in the white man's land, as I put it, the Black family will be judged more harshly because as far as they are concerned, because you're Black, you are an abuser of your children. And I'm saying this from personal experience and the experience of many others. So this fundamental attribution error is what we're going to talk about today. I want to talk about how it impacts us, how the fact that this is something that we all go through. This thing can mess with our relationships, our peace of mind, and even our faith journey. And for women in the trenches of life, it is important that we are sensitive to these things because we do not want to lose our peace. We already have a lot going on in our lives, and we need our peace to navigate the circumstances that we found ourselves. So let's get into some of the ways that this fundamental attribution error, this thinking pattern impacts us. One thing we need to know that this is a mindset that adds stress because when you're making snap judgments about people, about people's behavior daily, it takes away your peace and creates emotional distance between you and those people. And then you find yourself feeling isolated, which is the hunting ground of the enemy. When you are isolated, then the enemy can have their way with you. And I mean the devil. I don't mean other human beings. And in fact, some people who have given themselves over to the devil to use them, they isolate people that are vulnerable and they take advantage of them. So you want to be sensitive. You want to be discerning of any patterns that has been eroding your well-being, your mental well-being, and draining you. You want to be cognizant of it. So it drains you emotionally and it impacts you negatively, like in mental well-being negatively. So when we default, to judgment, we damage trust and connection. I was talking to somebody who was always saying that he did this because he was thinking this. He's telling this person to do this to me, but you have no proof. You are assuming this thing. You're assuming that because this person, for example, a child does not greet you properly, then you say it's because it's the parents that said they shouldn't talk to you. So it's that kind of conversation I was having with this person. And I told that person to remember when we were the children's age, were we free with adults? Were we able to have conversations with them freely as if they were our friends? Even when the adults was friendly. So you need to go back in time and not assume. You have no, and I also told that person that these assumptions, they create a negative energy field around you. So even when the other person does not know that you're judging them negatively, there's just something. There's an unseen negative energy that makes it impossible for that person to trust you and you will not have a connection. And the terrible thing about it is that this negative thinking pattern magnifies mistrust. So you cannot trust that person. That person cannot trust you. Therefore, you get what you get is chronic stress, bitterness, and isolation. Do you know that your body cannot tell the difference between a real threat and an imagined one? So what you're thinking, these negative thoughts, your body does not realize that they are just thoughts without proof. So every misjudged interaction floods you with stress hormones like cortisol. And this impacts your mood, your sleep, and even physical health. It also distorts your view of yourself because what you sow is what you reap, according to the Bible. When you sow judgment, you begin to expect judgment from others. The Bible says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. I say, as a man thinketh in his heart about others, so he himself is. So if you think people are not trustworthy, it's because you are not trustworthy. If you have no proof, why negative? Why do you go to the negative slant? Why are you slanting to the negative in the way you feel about people? And as a Christian, do you know that the Bible says in the book of Matthew, judge not so that you will not be judged? It's not just moral advice. It's not an instruction from God that, oh, I must obey God. It is actually soul care. You're caring for yourself. When you do not judge others, when you believe the best of them, when you give them the benefit of doubt. But instead of judgment, can we begin to try to shift the way we think, asking, when those thoughts come, what else could be true? Is there something I don't know? How would I want someone to interpret my own bad day? And the day that I lose my cool because life is happening to me, will I want someone to give me grace, to be merciful unto me, to be thoughtful in their response to me? Or will I want them to assume the worst of me, assume the worst about me? This is called compassionate framing in science. And this, when we begin to frame our thought patterns in a compassionate way, it helps us reduce stress. It helps us build emotional resilience. For women in the trenches, we cannot afford to be weak. For many of us, we have to be strong just for ourselves, for those that depend on us, for example, our children. So we cannot mess with our minds. And wherever, we're not able to see the full story, we should choose grace. The Bible tells us in the book of 1 Samuel 16, verse 7, people look at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. Only God looks at the heart. We don't see the heart. What if you decide to choose to see positive, to not assume that this person's action is as a result of who they inherently are? Even those who are terribly wicked today, none of us is born wicked. We are all born, we are all born a clean slate and experiences from birth and the rest of the life we've lived right on that slate. And what it writes can change who we are. For example, children go to school. So many kids don't start having behavioral problems until they go to school. when they resume school and they're being bullied, then they react. And research shows that people can change their personality types. A person's character can be changed by bullying. Bullying can change a person. A good person, a soft-hearted person, can now have to learn to be hard because they were bullied. A conservative, well-behaved young person can turn into a wayward, reckless, living person because of trauma from school or from their families. None of us born bad. Why don't we try to make a shift from the negative, judgmental perspective of looking at people and their behaviors? Let me tell you, you're not doing it for the person. It's a lifeline for you. That's how we stop spiraling into shame ourselves. We stop the shame pattern. One of the words I hate most is that shame. And you know why I hate it? Because shame is at the edge of our minds all the time. It's pushing, trying to come and get us. When terrible things happen to us, so many people cannot tell. They can't share. They have to stew in the pain because they are ashamed of what people will say. And why are they ashamed? Because they know what people have said about others. They've seen it written on social media posts. They've been there in conversation. This is why we can't afford to live our lives defaulting to fundamental attribute error, where we judge people harshly without knowing the full story. Now, I want us to take a moment to think about a time. Think about a time when you misjudged someone, and after you found out later what they were really going through. Now, think about yourself when somebody judged you wrongly, where even what you were saying was quickly twisted, either because they misunderstood you or because they were operating under fundamental attribution error. And think about this and do yourself one favor. Ask yourself, what assumptions am I carrying today? What am I carrying? What story do I need to pause and rewrite? So you see, this is not about becoming a perfect person. This is about you choosing peace. Every time you take a moment before jumping to the conclusions of judgment, you protect your own heart. You know, I've gone through a lot in my life. People have betrayed my trust. When I share my story, share it as a matter of fact. This is what I went through. Those who abused me, abused my children, in church, in family, at work, people who wanted to strip me of my dignity, who actually wanted to destroy me, used their power, wielded their power, people that slandered me. When I talk about those things, they are just things that have happened. I love each person I've ever met. And it's not because I have what it takes to love, or it was a prayer point that I did for many years. I didn't want to lose the essence of who I was because of the experiences I had gone through, or the experiences I'm even what people are giving to me. I didn't want to give it to others because the way those negative things made me feel, I don't think anyone should be made to feel that way. So you see, this is also something that we have to choose. We can choose for our eyes to see beyond the surface, for our hearts to offer grace instead of assumptions, and for us to have the courage to seek understanding where judgment feels easier. You see, we don't have to get it right every time. We don't. But every step that we make with compassion and closer, going closer, deeper into compassion, is a step we're making toward our own healing. Can you imagine if all of us related with each other with transparency and not operate under the fundamental attribution error of assuming that people's behavior is a function of their personality, not a function of their situation? Can you imagine if we all gave each other grace? Can you imagine if we all didn't, choose to judge, but rather reached out to understand and to provide support? What do you think will happen? Mercy won't stop us. Thank you so much for listening. And I hope that you can choose to be that one who, when the others are being judgmental, can remind them or redirect them to consider what they cannot see, to consider the backstory. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week. Bye-bye.